Okay. So we talked about 3 categories of attributes of God yesterday. And we were discussing the third topic, which is negative attributes. There's a whole field in medieval philosophy or in theology that's called negative theology, which means is that we work on what God isn't, and by knowing what He's not, we come closer to understanding what He is. Now, we cannot know what God is because His essence is very, very remote from us. Welcome. Thank you for coming on time to the 310 class. By the way, I do want to make a comment. I ran into somebody yesterday on the train from the Mechina program who told me that the 5:30 hour is optional and you don't have to be here. So I would like to make sure that everybody understands 5:30 is not optional. Everyone has to be here. Okay? If you have any questions, please see me privately. I would be happy to explain to you the new schedule. Okay, so we said we say God is alive because we're just simply saying God is not dead. Life, attributing life to God doesn't make a lot of sense because life, as we know it, is either plant life, right? Molecules, amoebas, fish, animals, human beings. But clearly God is neither of any, and He's not any of these categories. So we must say that when we use the term God is alive, we just mean that God is not dead. When we say God is wise, we don't mean that God has wisdom. Is God smart? Very smart? Yeah. Can He do calculus? Yeah. Yeah, can He calculate how many toes we all have in our room without taking our socks off? Yeah. That's a ridiculous example. They go, yeah, God could do that. The point is, when we think about intelligence, it's only human intelligence. We compare other animals, for example, to human intelligence. We say, oh, dolphins are very intelligent. Why? Because they convinced us it's okay to eat tuna, but not okay to eat dolphins. Eat those guys. Let us through. I mean, we don't eat dolphins because it's not kosher, but Lamaisa, what's the difference? By the way, Alan, while you were gone, did you find the keys? Yes. Oh, Baruch Hashem. Everybody can rest assured that everything is safe. The camera shut off, and then somebody came and tried to fix it. Okay. So, whatever. What's funny? If the camera was turned around, the whole audience would be laughing. You know, I saw yesterday that at least 100 and some odd people are watching the shiur every day. So I guess this is important for some people. What's your name?
Jacob.
So now Jacob also is going to be part of the, I don't want to say groupies, but we're trying to learn a very holy book called the Kuzari. So, when we yes, sir.
Can I ask questions?
Please.
Excellent. Is what you're saying the general philosophy held across, Judaism, or is that specifically this Moser versus Hasidus versus?
Okay, good question. Good, very good. There are 2 major approaches to negative theology, or understanding when we apply terms to God, we mean them in the negative way. There are 2 major books that deal with this. One is the Kuzari, this book, and another book is the Rambam, Maimonides' Guide of the Perplexed, and they are in agreement for the most part. Now, if you look at the Kabbalistic literature, okay, which some of us want to learn and some of us shouldn't be touching that stuff yet, there's a book called Shomer Emunim HaKadmon of Yosef Irgas. So there he brings part of the discussion in the Rambam as to explain that that's what's also happening in Kabbalistic texts. And he brings examples from the Zohar and all that. So I would say it's safe to see that as it's not a controversial topic. Does everybody agree with it? I don't know. But it's not something that is only in this book and hence...
Right. If I could say, because I've learned, and the Rambam talks about it, you can talk about God's essence, but you could talk later in different worlds as he relates to us. So when I say God is wise, it's kind of many, Atzilus, Bria, it's way down the line as he relates to us. But speaking of his essence, you cannot say that. There's nothing...
I'm going even further than that. That the whole concept of wisdom, of wise, is a human concept. So when you apply it to God, you automatically are humanizing him, right? You're turning him into a human being. Because that's what wisdom is. Right? When you look at a cow, we good or what? So we look at a cow, we compare it, is it smart as a human being? Oh, it's a dumb cow. This might be actually a very smart cow compared to other cows. But compared to a human being, yeah, it can't do trigonometry. Same thing with over here, we're taking a human concept. We can only understand the world through our eyes, right? And we see the world in our human perspective. It's sad, because I'm sure that if we could step outside, we would understand reality in a much deeper way. But we can't. We're stuck in this body. The neshama is peering through these windows, listening through these holes, and everything that is happening, the information, the data that comes into your mind is being processed, but as a human being. When we apply any of these terms to God, as God is wise, we don't really mean that literally, because what's wise for us? Einstein, is he really smart? Yeah, probably. But it's not comparable to God's wisdom. There's no shaykh, there's no connection whatsoever. So we just mean by that as God is not ignorant. That's what we mean. If we're really serious, that's what we mean. There are people who use God language without thinking about it. And here, the Kuzari is trying to explain to us to be more sensitive, that when we say God loves, right? Well, that's a human emotion, right? So we attribute a human emotion to God. You can't take that literally, because then it won't make sense. God is not a human being. He doesn't have emotions. We have a hard time to relate to that, right? Have you ever watched the movie Toy Story? It's a way of us relating to the toys, what we turn them into human beings, that they have emotions, and they have wills, and they have desires, and they have this whole... Because that's how we understand the world. That's how kids look at toys, right? Oh, don't hit Dolly because he's going to cry, don't leave, whatever, the little bunny rabbit, because... Now with animals, since they're a little closer to us, we feel that we can read them, that we know, but you don't know. You really have no idea. Your dog, maybe he's just planning to kill you in your sleep. But then he's just like, whatever. It's going to be too much of a mess to clean the blood. Do you know what he's thinking? You don't know what dogs are thinking. I'm sorry. That's called schizophrenia. Al, you had a question. Did you want to ask it now? You raised your hand and then... Okay. How you doing, Sadiq? Tov, let's keep going. So, can we say that God is dead? That's going to be just as wrong as saying God is alive. Because death and being alive are two states of physical entities. Is a rock dead?
Yes.
A rock is dead.
It's not alive.
It's not alive. Is a doornail dead?
It's complicated.
It's complicated. Okay, now, could you say also, is God's essence light or darkness? Neither. For sure it's not light or darkness. Is it sunlight? For sure it's not sunlight. Is it darkness, absence of sunlight? Well, for sure not. Then how do we understand it? Somebody asked yesterday about the Shekhinah, right? And how do we understand? So today we're going to try to get to, you asked me that. So we'll get to it today. Okay. So he says to us, he says exactly, I'm quoting him. It says that when we say alive, but not alive like us, we're just saying that we don't really know what the essence of God is. We don't. But we know what He's not. He's not non-existent. We know that God exists. What exactly His existence is, we can't tell. We can't. You can't explain God's... What is the essence of God? Okay, good. Now, when we say God is one, we also have to understand that when we use the term one, we're thinking it in human terms. Wow. 3 in a row. Okay, you do one more and you're out of here. No? It's done?
Looks like it.
I hope you didn't want the used ones. I was worried. Okay, so when we say one, he says obviously we don't really understand the unity of God when we say God is one. Because when we think of unity, when we think of a human body, that's one, but it's made up of a lot of different parts. When you think of one atom, one, well, we know it's made up of what?
Protons, electrons.
And neutrons.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good, good. And who says Ohr Somayach students don't know science? Good for you. Now, so he says when you say one molecule, water molecule, one water molecule, what is that made out of? H2O, which is what? 2 hydrogen molecules and 1 oxygen. Beautiful. Beautiful. Look at that. Intro to chemistry, intro to physics. Look at that. We're getting everything done in one book. And also, think of units of time. When you say 1 minute, we say 1 in terms of units of time. That's also not unity. Or a year. So, but when we say 1, we're just saying that God is above any multiplicity, any combination. God is not combined. By definition, the Rambam brings that anything, it's based on Aristotle, that anything that is combined is created. If you're made out of parts, you're created.
What isn't created?
God. Zeu. Yes. The Rambam says that the one positive statement that you could make about God, that He is wajib al-wujud. Wajib al-wujud. Wajib is mechuyav ha-metziut. Wajib al-wujud in Arabic, it's the Arabic for mechuyav ha-metziut, which is He is a necessary existent. God exists by virtue of His nature. We exist by virtue of a cause. Right? Mom and Dad were the one who had to do something in order for us to come to existence. Right? What? Al, what? What's wrong? You want to say that you came in a different way? That's okay. It's fine. We exist because of a series of causes, right? great 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 grandparents to great great grandparents to great grandparents to. That's how it works. We don't exist by virtue of ourselves. We didn't bring ourselves to being. Right? Whereas God, as the Rambam explains, is necessary existent. Since there is something, there must be God. And if there's nothing, God would still exist. Okay. Now, there are some things that we call, that's it?
Gotta run.
Gotta run, okay.
Thank you, though.
Sure. There are terms also that describe God's actions. Creator. Right? Performs miracles. All those things we can't say because we're not describing God. We're describing actions that are derived, caused by Him. And therefore there's no real problem using this type of language. Okay? Because He creates through speech. Right? We know that. And so there are lots and lots of examples where we describe God as acting without any intermediaries. Okay? Do you understand that concept? Intermediaries, right? God doesn't require 3 or 4 other steps in order to have whatever He wants in this universe. It just...
Give an example of an intermediate.
An intermediate?
Intermediary.
Yes. Yes. For example, when God said to Avram Avinu, look at the heavens, right? They appeared, it was clear there were no, he didn't need someone to come and blow the clouds away and for the sun to pull it down. It is what it is. When the sea split, it wasn't that God sent down a message and then it was this went to this person, that this angel and then that angel. It just. So there are actions that God does without any intermediaries. What's the policy for somebody who's like he's asleep out? Do we wake him up or we let him sleep?
Wake him. No, I think you're supposed to ask him beforehand if he falls asleep. Do you want it?
But since I failed to do that, should I do it now?
Or you trick him, you slam the book and you say, like you used to do. Like you used to do that. You used to do that, Rabbi. You used to do that.
I didn't say you're not. Aren't you going to miss us all?
Of course.
You're going to go to Seattle, then to Chicago, and you're going to be, wow, I wonder what's going on. Oh, I'm going to watch the video because I want to see who is he going to put on the shidduch profile first. Who's the first guy? No, you're not noticing the guy is showing me like. That's what he's doing, trying to. What? You're telling me you don't want to be on the profile. What? He didn't. Not only that. Look, he told me that he's leaving, and he's going to LA, which means that he's going to start school and then shidduchim. That's how it works. So then, Al, come on. I'm telling you, one shot of this, and your mother's phone is going to be off the hook. But the deal is you take the 5th one. The 5th one, no matter how... just close the deal. What? Why?
Wait till you're in Shidduchim.
What does that mean, wait till he's in shidduchim?
He'll find out.
He'll find out. I told you this Shatchanis called me. She says, hello, Rabbi Matalon? Yes, my name is Shatchanis. So I want to talk to you about this girl. And after maybe 3-4 minutes, I said, I'm flattered, but I'm married. It's like, no, I'm for Ohr Somayach.
For everyone?
For anyone. She wanted to know if I have someone for this person.
What'd you say?
No. Why would I do it to any girl?
Wow.
Why would I do that to her? Is there really, honestly, is there anybody here in this room right now that you would take to be your daughter's husband?
No.
Of course not. You just saw that, like, no. Now Eitan's like, but hey, I'd make a good husband.
Single till death. How many daughters do I have?
B'dem b'ruh. All right, yalla, let's go. Let's keep going, guys. So, Kadosh Baruch Hu performed miracles to the Jewish people so that they would know that God runs the universe. There were periods in human history that people worshipped natural forces, believing that there are gods and goddesses that control natural forces. And therefore they need to be placated, made happy by sacrificing, by doing certain things in order for the weather patterns to be good for agriculture, for the sheep to have plentiful wool and milk and lambs, all of that stuff. But the whole point of the Exodus, or what's happening in Mitzrayim, in Egypt, was that the Kadosh Baruch Hu took on every single deity, right? The Egyptians believed in the Ennead, 9 deities, 9 gods and goddesses. And each plague is directed towards one of those deities to show not only the Egyptians, but also the Jewish people, that they should not be afraid or worship any of these natural forces. That it is God runs the universe. And so we can describe God in his peulot, in his actions. So then the king hits the rabbi with a very good question. And it's such a good question that the Rambam dedicated close to 70 chapters in the Moreh Nevuchim answering this question. He said to him, what are you going to do with all of the physical descriptions that are in the Torah? For example, we describe God as ro'eh. God sees. God hears. God writes on the luchos. Goes down on Har Sinai. God is happy with his maisim. Happy with his creations. He's sad. What are you going to do with all these? These are verses in the Torah. So, if you're telling us that God cannot be described, why is the Torah describing God in physical terms? How can God speak? In order to speak, you need to have vocal cords. You need to have a tongue, lips, teeth. Right? If you're not sure why you need teeth to speak, go visit your local Walmart. And you'll hear people without teeth speaking. And you definitely need teeth.
So you're saying when God gave us Sarah Dibros, he didn't actually say it? It says the first 2 he said to us. We heard it.
The question is, what does that mean?
It means we heard it.
Now you changed. You see, we heard it. You can hear something without somebody saying it. Which means you're hearing what? Something waves, sound waves penetrating your eardrum, correct? So God could have created those sound waves to enter your ear without him. He doesn't have a mouth to speak. He can just create those sound waves to hit your auditory senses, and then you hear. But it's not that God spoke. It requires a more sophisticated approach to understanding the psukim, so that when we keep in mind that we're staying away from any corporeality, physicality to God, we have to be more careful. So he says, the rabbi says, didn't I use a parable describing God as a just judge? Which he did. We know that. If you listen to last year and the year before that, we brought that parable. And so he says, when a judge gives his psak, his verdict, the verdict sometimes makes one person happy and another person sad. For example, it's a murder trial, and the defendant is found guilty by the judge. Okay, so the defendant obviously is sad, distraught. Right, his family, they're going to lose him. Whereas the victim's family, the prosecution, the people, whatever, they're very happy because justice has been served. Are you raising your hand? Do you want to say something? And so, there are those who would say that God loves this side and God is angry with this side. Right? That God is angry with the defendant and God is merciful or happy with the victim. But that's not accurate. It's not what's going on. He says sometimes God decrees that these people's homes were going to be destroyed, and some people's are going to win the lottery. Does that mean that somebody wins the lottery, automatically God favors him, and the person who lost his home, that God is angry at him? Not necessarily. And so he says, nothing is hidden from God. And therefore, because nothing is hidden from God, we describe God as seeing and hearing. Not that he sees and hears, because he doesn't have eyes. But nothing is hidden. Nothing that's happening in this world is hidden from the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Everything is known by God. I don't want to get into the question of knowledge of future contingencies. That's a separate issue that we're going to deal with at some later point. He says there are some situations where air or other bodies are affected according to his will and receive a form according to his decree. For example, God decreed the heaven and the earth. So they took the shape that they did. God decreed that the luchos, the tablets of the 10 Commandments, would appear in a particular way. So we describe it as if he did it with his finger, but God doesn't have a finger. Do you think God created a finger to do this? No, of course not. Chas v'shalom. And so we describe him speaking or writing because we are seeing the spiritual effects of his decrees. And those are called sometimes Kvod Hashem. Sometimes they're called Ruach HaKodesh. Okay? And so those are effects that are coming to us that we are recognizing. So the Spirit of God, Ruach HaKodesh, is something that God creates in order to fulfill his will. So he said, okay, when you explain all this, means that we're not adding the concept of multiplicity to God. We still maintain the unity of God. But what are you going to do when the philosophers say that God cannot have a will? There's no ratzon in God. Why? Because it comes from a certain perspective that when you want something, it means you're missing it. If you're missing it, then you're not perfect. And if you're not perfect, you're not God. Or if you have an imperfect God, you have a whole other problem to deal with. So he says, it's not very difficult to answer this question of why the philosophers deny the idea of will to Hashem. And he says, what we're going to say to the philosopher, he says, what do you think is the cause for the heavens to be in motion? Right? Today we think of the universe as expanding or contracting, or expanding and contracting. Right? So what do you think is the cause of this motion? Of the galaxies and space expanding? And he says, according to you, you have this diurnal sphere that is turning, where all the stars are embedded on it. It's a different model of physics that we use. We don't use that model anymore, thanks to discoveries since Galileo and Copernicus. But let's put it this way, for a good 1,000 years, this was the model that everybody used, that the Earth is at the center of the universe, doesn't move, and then there are spheres like onion layers around, and then there's one large sphere that is turning the whole system. And as it turns, all the other spheres are turning also. Okay? That's the model. And so, how do you explain that he stays in his orbit, doesn't move, doesn't go anywhere, and the Earth is standing in the middle, right? Without, it seems to be just floating in the middle of the air, without leaning on anything. Who set this up? And it certainly, he says to the philosopher, they didn't create themselves. The Earth didn't create itself. Nothing creates itself. Did you create yourself? No. And so he says, nothing creates itself, and therefore, the same entity that created the 10 Commandments, it's the same being or entity that created the structure of the universe. And we call that the will of God. You call it cause, the first cause. But we're talking about the same thing. We'll stop here and we'll join the Mechina program in Mincha service.